Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity webinar series. NCORE is part of the Southwest Center for Human Relations Studies at the University of Oklahoma in Norman, Oklahoma. My name is Dedrick Perkins, and I use any and all pronouns, and I am the Senior Program Coordinator, and I'm delighted to welcome you and be your host this afternoon. We hope that we continue the conference tradition of working to improve racial, ethnic, and intercultural relations on college campuses and community organizations by providing virtual learning opportunities like this one. Welcome to the Spring 2024 webinar series. And NCORE has monthly webinars on the first and last Wednesday of each month, with the occasional exceptions like holidays and today. Some webinars are free and others are offered at a modest fee of $25. Our next webinar is entitled Divine Healing for Organizers, Building Spiritual Practice with Tarot, and that will be facilitated by Taya Brown from Equitas Health, and it will broadcast on Wednesday, February 28th. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items. If you need to utilize the closed captioning, make sure your settings are set to on. Always remain muted unless you are asked or requested to unmute. We ask that your background have no moving images or flashing lights, and please report any specific tech, accessibility, or any other operational concerns via direct message to me, the session host. The presenter will take questions periodically during the session, so if you have a question during the session, feel free to use the features such as raise your hand, the chat box, or the Q&A box. Today, our featured presenter is Tracy Simmons. She uses she, her pronouns from Mount Hood Community College, and she will be presenting on strategic planning for equity, a framework for implementing transformational change.
Thank you, Dedrick. I'm going to share my screen real quick and get us to some slides. Just 1 minute. Anybody who knows me knows I have 8 million windows open at any given moment, so just bear with me. Here we are. All right. Slideshow mode. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is an opportunity for us to discuss. And so what I want to do is kind of get us started, and then I'll give some kind of guidelines. Of course, this is our inclusion statement at NCORE. Please take a peek at that. The idea is that we are going to create a community of learners here, but we're also going to make sure that community is free from all forms of discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. I'll start with a quick land acknowledgement. I am currently in Gresham, Oregon, which is east of the city of Portland. And I want to start with saying that we honor the Indigenous people whose traditional and ancestral homelands we stand on, the Multnomah, the Cathlamet, Clackamas, Tumwater, Watlala bands of the Chinook, the Tualatin Kalapuya, and many other Indigenous nations of the Columbia River. It's important to acknowledge the ancestors of this place and to recognize that we are here because of the sacrifices forced upon them. And remembering these communities, we honor their legacy, their lives, and their descendants. And I think it's important for you to think about where you are today, whose lands you are sitting on, as well as to think about a labor acknowledgement. We honor the enslaved people of Africa whose bodies were stolen. They were brought to the Americas by force, and their stolen labor was a vehicle for the United States to become an economic force in the world. We honor the descendants of the enslaved African people and acknowledge the systemic work to right past wrongs. And, I think it's important that we, make these acknowledgements, but they should not be a performance. Our role as participants in this society is to really think about how we go beyond acknowledgement and move towards repair. What does repair look like for you as a person that exists and is privileged to be here, given all of the sacrifices that were made by other people, but also what does it look like for your institution? What does, what is the commitments that are needing to be made or being made that help foment that repair? All right, so we are talking about strategic planning for equity, really how to move forward a strategic plan that is equity centered, and also thinking about the communities that you serve and how those communities' needs are represented in this plan. I always come with some group agreements. Of course, be mindful we are in a virtual space, and so I know a lot of distractions can come up. If you have to step away, if you have to take care of your body, do so. But as much as possible, please stay engaged. I will have opportunities where I ask questions, and this is a conversation more so than hopefully me just talking in one direction. So I invite folks to share. Please step up if you are a little more trepidatious, a little more shy, and step back if you're like me and you can speak for hours at end. Please give space for other folks. You can also use the chat. I ask that if you are using the chat, please keep it to conversations that are in the context of what we're talking about right now. Side conversations, hopefully. Use I statements when you do share. Consider impact versus intent. Of course, be honest and vulnerable always. We're going to listen to each other to understand, and we're going to avoid assuming any intent behind that. We can ask if we need to. We want to offer grace to each other as well. This is a learning space. And part of learning is getting it wrong, which I do on a regular basis because I am a lifelong learner. Please suspend blame, shame, guilt, fear, and denial. These are what I refer to as the horsemen of a DEI conversation. They do very little for us in the purpose of forwarding our own learning, for the purpose of really sitting with the discomfort of what we learn. They are real emotions, and so I invite you, if you begin feeling this sense of guilt or shame or blame or wanting to deny, write it down, check in with yourself, and please give yourself an opportunity to sit with those feelings. But for the purpose of this conversation, they are not very helpful emotions. Confidentiality, huge, right? In this room is a ton of people. And so what's shared in the chat, what's shared, we really want to keep this as much as possible in this room. And then also to accept non-closure. We are not going to figure out all the problems of the world today or tomorrow. And the idea of this work is that we accept that it is ongoing, and there is no endpoint. And that is really hard sometimes to kind of sit in. So hopefully we are good with these. If you want to throw a thumbs up as a reaction, please do. You can use the reactions the whole way through. Helpful for me to know that you are paying attention and that you are also engaged. I do see a hand of a Curtis. So just want to make sure that I'm not missing anybody. Zoom etiquette, of course, raise your hand if you would like to speak and you'll be unmuted. At the time you are unmuted, you can also turn on your camera. We'd love to see your gorgeous faces. And then, of course, be considerate of others. If you are sharing a reflection, please limit that to 2 minutes or less so we can give other folks a chance. We only have 90 minutes today. There will be time at the end for a discussion, but I also like to just have it be more organic where folks don't have to wait to the end, but can share and ask questions as we go. We also have the Q&A function. So if you do have a question that I haven't got to, we'll have an opportunity to check in with that as well. Of course, once again, this is an affirming space. This is a learning space as well. And we're teachers and learners every day. That's just part of being a human. Please lean into the role that feels appropriate for you as you share, as you use the chat. So as I'm giving my kind of introduction of who I am, please feel free to type in the chat who you are, your institution, what you want to get out of this session, what your role is, any of those things that you feel comfortable, your pronouns. Please feel free to share what you are comfortable sharing in the chat so we can learn a little about each other. So for me, I am a first-generation community college graduate. I experienced considerable barriers to success, including houselessness, being a single parent, financial struggles, trying to find work-life balance, trying to find childcare and healthcare and all of the things, right? And so I really have dedicated my career to barrier removal and thinking about how we design systems for equity and inclusion. What does it look like to really serve a community of learners who is oftentimes in most need of educational opportunity, but oftentimes has been under-resourced, marginalized, racialized, or otherwise minoritized, right? What is the design imperative in those systems to make sure that we can really, truly serve the people we are here to serve? I've been a program coordinator, been an advisor, associate dean, a dean, a director. I'm currently the associate vice president of diversity, equity, inclusion at Mount Hood Community College, and I'll tell you more about Mount Hood in just a moment. I also have been supporting the Oregon Community College Association, and I've worked as a co-chair on their board committee for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Oregon Community College Association is kind of the umbrella organization for Oregon's 17 community colleges. And so I've done work at the state, advancing DEI, having conversations in both the more urban settings as well as some of our very rural Oregon community colleges. I am a cat and dog lover, and kind of a person that geeks out on strategic plans. So in my spare time, I do take a peek at strategic plans and just see what other folks are doing. I've also lended some of my efforts to other organizations that are very much interested in strategic planning and focusing on advancing DEI within their context. And then lastly, I am a co-host of an FM talk radio show. And so I'm just a jack of all trades, but this really is what I enjoy most, kind of talking to folks and trying to do what I can with my ability and scope to advance this work. So thank you for putting in a chat. Love to see these chats. Welcome, everybody. I think it's important to start with some definitions because we're in an interesting time that I will refer to in just a moment. But when we at Mount Hood Community College, and I specifically say diversity, I am referring to this. Really thinking about the broad and wonderful kind of full umbrella of what it is to be a human in this world. And so you can share with me in the chat, like what pops out in this picture for you as we kind of explore this definition through pictures. What do you see? What grabs your eye? Inclusion, yes. Accessibility, culture, oh yes, different body types, representation, many different ages, religions. Andrea says they see themselves. Wow, right? Universal design feels like all different colors of skin. I see tattoos and different hair colors and body sizes and types, right? So really, the idea that diversity is a one thing it really is expansive, right? And when we think about the beauty of human experience and who we are beholden to with regard to educating people, this is what we want our organizations to look like. And not just the people we serve, but our organizations internally, right? Our faculty, our staff, the people from everywhere from the groundskeepers to the people who serve food in the cafeteria, right? We're really thinking about that broad spectrum of people. And this also goes up to the president's office and our board, right? So we really have to make some definitions clear about what this is, because some of these words have been manipulated to not feel good. I'm always working in the space of equity and justice as well, right? So I borrowed this cute little quadrant photo, and you can see that kind of the way our society was structured was for inequality. You can see that there's a bent tree and there's two beautiful people. And one person is just, through no fault of their own, having apples drop in their lap. And on the other side of that first quadrant on the left, you can see that the other person in the blue overalls is wondering, where's my apple? um, on that next one down on the bottom left, you can see equality there, where now we've given the two people a tool, right? That's the same tool. But you can see, because the tree is bent, even though there's an equal tool and the ladder being provided, that person still can't reach the tree, right? And it's going, well, where are my apples, right? I have a tool, but I still can't reach these apples. Equity is recognizing that the tree is bent and that we have to give different resources to different people. Custom tools that identify and address the inequality, and then provide access to the apples. So I think as a society, we have situated ourselves here, right? We've said, well, I don't know about the tree. We didn't build the tree. That's not my fault. But let's just keep giving people the same things over and over again. And I think the folks who are frightened by equity is worried that, right? Now you're giving someone an unfair advantage because they have more than, say, these people here. And so we have to begin to unpack, like, what is this narrative? How do we shift that narrative? Because until we straighten the tree, we'll be trying to either do this or this quite ineffectively. So the idea is to move to justice, right? Where we are not only giving folks what they need to access the resources, we're also fixing the tree. I think the next concept is inclusion, and I saw that with folks looking at that picture of different bodies and people, and really, beginning to see themselves in the photo. But, here we have a table, and I hear folks say it all the time, build a bigger table. Well, great to build a bigger table. Is there room for everybody at the table? Is there a seat that works for everyone's body at the table? Are people's voices heard and responded to at that table? Right? And I think when we talk about true inclusion, it means that everyone feels welcomed, embraced, situated in a place that is for them, and they're able to be heard and, more importantly, responded to. So this is, aspirational. This is our work. We also have belonging. And when I think about kind of why we engage with certain organizations, why we have the jobs that we have, why we do the work, it often comes back to belonging. A deep sense of connection to others, a deep sense that what we bring to the table is highly valued and unique and can't quite be replicated by anyone else, a sense that your peers and the people who you are with on a regular basis deeply care about you. These are all important. And when we think about this in the context of even being part of an employee group, right, we know that transitions happen a lot because people don't feel that sense of belonging. We know that students don't stay if they don't feel a sense of belonging. And so this also is our work. I think it's important that we have this context about, Mount Hood Community College. We're located in Gresham. People are like, where is Gresham? We serve roughly 19,000 students per year. We have a really good faculty ratio. It's 17 to 1. 70% of our faculty are full-time, and we are kind of pushing over 51% students of color, as well as emerging as a Hispanic serving institution. We also have 87.5% white faculty. So take that for what you will. More information, we have 9 feeder school districts to Mount Hood Community College. And of the 9, 6 of them are on a list of educational school service districts that have over 40% or more students of color. Some of the largest feeder schools to our institution are at 70+% students of color. And so we're thinking towards the future of how we serve, why we do the work that we do, and how we do it better to meet the needs of the people who will be coming to our institution in search of that educational opportunity. I also want to, kind of put some context on this and talk about it. We had, of course, work happening at the college prior to the pandemic. I'd love if you want to share in the chat what your organization was doing kind of prior to the pandemic. But as the pandemic kind of came on, there were a lot of challenges related to student basic needs. How do we get students connected to Wi-Fi? How do we do all of this? And then there was George Floyd. So before the pandemic, before George Floyd, there was work happening in the organization. It was not all stitched together super well at Mount Hood Community College, but there was work happening and a lot of people were very much engaged in it. And then once that pandemic hit, it was kind of this fever pitch of like, oh my goodness, a realization of some of the things that our students had been experiencing prior to the pandemic, but were exacerbated, right? So we're talking about, of course, unemployment, food insecurity, housing insecurity, and conversations about our students, trying to participate in their education, in their vehicles in the parking lot. We were having conversations about, our students who English is not their first language, and how do we connect with them in an online space, right? What are the relationships? All of that. So March 2020, we really started scrambling. And then there was in Portland specifically, just really thinking about June 2020 and the fever pitch of kind of a backlash to what was happening, right? Black Lives Matter. And our organization was just deeply embroiled in like, wow, these are all of these things happening. What do we do? And yes, I will be sharing the slide deck. Dedrick is welcome to share that with folks. Please feel free to do that. But we were like, oh my goodness, what is this? And so we really began building some capacity in the organization to respond to these world events, these local events, of course, the pandemic, and building some capacity to really focus on those. So in October of 2021, we received a National Equity Award. My gosh, oh, an award, oh my goodness. So the Association of Community College Trustees gave the Mount Hood Community College Board of Trustees this award. And at this time, I was a little bit over 1 year into my role that I have currently. And I was going, an award, that's nice. But it was an award for our efforts to address racism and poverty in the community. And this was important. I think awards are great, but oftentimes they're jumping off points, not end points. And what I saw was the opportunity to leverage this award to say, so what are we really doing? What did we get this award for again? Not with skepticism, but more questioning, because I've always been a questioner. So we got an award for some of the student basic needs work that we were doing, development and implementation of our equity lens, which we kind of have an opportunity to look at today. Support for and development of our Multicultural and Diversity Resource Center. Some efforts that we were doing around equitable student achievement, looking at data, using and applying, kind of a lens towards like, how do we close gaps? What are the gaps and why are those persistent gaps existing in our organization? So it was some really early work that we were doing. And the board and executive, cabinet really had come together with some strategic efforts to advance DEI. So this is all just the context. So, what about strategic planning? What am I talking about right now? Well, what we really started looking at was the fact that the strategic plan wasn't so strategic. So I want to do a quick opportunity. I want you to go to your own institution's website and find the comprehensive strategic plan. This is the plan that hopefully most people know exists. Hopefully the organization is working towards. And I want you to just take a quick peek. In the chat, you can note any observations. Some questions I have are, did you find it? Was it easy to find? Was it 10 clicks down? What's in the plan? Do you know? Do you talk about it as an organization? So take about 4 minutes to do some digging. If you are not attached to an institution, please think about an institution in your region or a partner institution. If you're coming from a community-based organization, this conversation does apply to you. Okay, so just take a quick peek, and in the chat, share any observations. Hey, easy to find, looks great. I don't know. I can't find it. Feel free, be honest. Right. I'm looking. Ooh, the process top hit. Current plan, not so much. Googled it. Ooh, it's glossy. Not updated since 2018. Ooh, we're gonna get to that. Easy to find. Tabs for details. Love it. Couldn't find it. Text heavy. Ooh, control find. Does not include the word race. Interesting. 5-year plan updated recently. Love to see that. Romantic language. Ooh, devoted to it. And then there's a specific DEI plan. I think that's important to note. For sure. I'm gonna stop sharing really quick while y'all keep typing. Okay, I'm back. Love this sharing. It's got its own website. Ooh, that's real nice. Easy to find. Oop, couldn't find it. There's a lot of that. Nothing easy to find. Nothing information about DEI. Noting information about DEI. I'm not sure. 10-year plan and a 2050 plan. Oh my goodness, that's a plan. One of the strategic priorities, but trying to figure out how to define and measure equity has been a challenge, right? How do you measure the plan? Doesn't address racism, easy to read. Love this that we're doing this together. And I think, right, some of the goals are couched in the context of this work right now. So I don't want to forget about that. I think what's important to note as you are looking, right, we are in the midst of some massive, nationwide, well-funded, heavily backed anti-DEI efforts. And so we have to be thinking through this conversation, what are the workarounds? How do you do this work by any other name? How do you find the partners and leverage those partnerships who are bold and focused on the organizational mission. As I am situated in, you know, the kind of mission of community colleges is to serve people who historically were excluded from other educational opportunities, right? And so how do you do this work without DEI as a focus, right? What do you call it? What do you do? And so I really want you to be thinking about that throughout this conversation, especially if you are in one of those places that those anti-DE efforts are really front and center for your work. I've seen, partners and peers in other places really be frightened to do this work and frightened to call it what it is. And so we have to figure out what is our workaround. Saying yes, Glenda, DEI is very taboo. It's taboo even in the state of Oregon, just outside of the metro area. One of the counties that is in our catchment area just defunded their county level DEI program and are very excited to tell folks that they, saved $1 million in doing so, right? It's an interesting time that we're living in to do this work. And so I think it's just really important that regardless of those efforts, that we have a clear focus and vision and figure out what those workarounds are. So I see a question and I'm going to get to that. Absolutely. Nicholas is asking if I'm able to share the plan. So just hold that question and we'll keep going. So first I want to show you when I applied for the job that I currently have, excuse me, there was a plan in place and it was pretty interesting. I'm going to stop sharing really quick and see if I can show you what that one looks like. So let's make this bigger. Let's even make it bigger. So this was the plan that was on record when I applied for my job. You can see that I don't want to take anything away from my peers and amazing coworkers who were implementing this specific plan, but this was the strategic plan in 2019 when I applied for this job. So I applied the job 2019, got the job February of 2020, and within a month we were currently moving everything to an online operation because of the pandemic. But one of the first things I said in the interview was, tell me about this plan. There are some core themes here. You can see learner success, community pride, partner innovation, some amazing values. In there, you can kind of see we're mixing it in with a little bit of inclusion, tiny bit of accessibility. Nowhere in here do you see the words equity, but it's a lot of words. I'll just say that. Affordability, education, accessibility, community access, it's a lot of words. So anyone who said that theirs was really text heavy, this is what I was taking away from this document. A lot of words, not too many verbs, and even less around the planning space, So when I started asking questions, what is the planning process? How does this planning process really guide us as an organization? And if I am to take this position, what are we going to do about kind of this analysis of the current plan? So the plan itself was not so strategic. It was a good effort, right? There were no metrics attached to it. Few mentions of equity and inclusion, way too many things, lots of words, lots of values, but minimal alignment with actual planning of the organization. And so, I really kind of entered into this organization thinking about this, like, if the organization itself doesn't have a strategic roadmap for what the future looks like, and you're kind of just stumbling along, right? And so this is kind of where this conversation started. Um, I see, what is the meaning of a CDO? That's a Chief Diversity Officer. So a lot of folks in this work will be considered a Chief Diversity Officer. We don't use that term because we don't like the culturally appropriated word chief to be used in our institutional structure. So there are no chiefs at our organization. But when you think about this, right, there's a plan that's not a plan that we kind of use as a way to pat ourselves on the back. I think it's really important that we get real about that. So I think, when we talk about strategic plans, and I think a lot of organizations have them, sometimes it really is about how do you create a focus for an organization. So Mount Hood Community College, once again, serves about 19,000 students. We have about 1,700 employees. We have acreage, probably 50 plus acres. I mean, it's a large organization. And without a strategic roadmap, a plan, it's really hard to have the whole organization moving or rowing in the same direction. This helps us also advance initiatives for growth, future sustainability, and for my purposes, institutionalizing, operationalizing equity and inclusion and justice. Really be honest. I think the pitfalls of strategic planning, and you can, give a reaction or a thumbs up. Right? Sometimes there's a lack of imperative, and so the plan itself gets dusty on the shelf. Sometimes it's performance. It's like, oh, we've got accreditation coming. Our 7-year visit is happening. Let's make sure we've got this plan ready to go just in case they ask us, right? Sometimes it's just too much, right? So too much in the plan itself, it just makes it hard for any of it to get done, right? Sometimes there's no metrics of accountability. And to Rachel's point, sometimes there's too many metrics. It's all over the place. You're trying to track way too many things all at the same time. And so also in that kind of milieu, equity inclusion can become afterthoughts, things that are kind of slid in, or I'll talk about some other strategies other organizations have used. So, when we began this process, we really didn't want it to Andy's point, to make it feel like leaders were doing all of the work, but we really wanted to find a consultant who knew how important diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and justice are for our institution, and who had the experience to really weave that into our whole plan. We vetted proposals, and we basically ranked proposals for getting that consultant based on that. We wanted a plan that was actionable, that had some strong ties to the community, that had community engagement, and that was very much equity and inclusion centered, student centered as well. We made sure we looked at, as we were kind of vetting folks as well, that we were looking at examples of previous plans. Your best indication of what the consultant's going to produce for you is what they've produced for other folks. So if you are in the process right now of looking for a consultant, please be mindful that they oftentimes have work product that you can look at. And if that work product does not meet the needs of your organization, I would encourage you to pass on that or to really state clearly, hey, this is what we need. This doesn't look like what we need. This is not what we want our end result to be, and to really be thinking about that. We also, because we think diversity is an important, kind of concept, we were thinking about that in terms of our consultant organization. Do you have representation in your own organization? Are there people who speak multiple languages in your organization? Because as we knew we were going to do the work with the community, and recognizing that we had language and other accessibility needs, we wanted an organization who had those skills, who we didn't have to like tell or do the work for, but really were going to be a partner with us. And so we really wanted to make sure that that was included in our consultants' work and their portfolio of work. We absolutely tried to create an opportunity for community and student voice to show up in this process. And so we really were focused on both internal and external focus groups. We did a big, kind of wide and broad environmental scan. What's happening in the community like now? What's forecasted in the future? And that's kind of why we know about those feeder schools and their populations, thinking of, what's currently happening with regard to our community and new Americans coming in. We have refugee communities from Haiti, French speaking, we have Muslim refugees, Arabic speaking, we have a very large population of Latin Spanish speaking, as well as Asian immigrants, Russian, Ukrainian. I mean, we have so much need. And so it was really important that we were widening the environmental scan to really capture what's happening in our community and kind of looking at trends in population growth and socioeconomic status, need, all of those things. And then because we have an amazing opportunity to have close contact with parents of young families, because we have embedded in our programming a Head Start program, we really were like, let's tap into those parents and families as well to think about what do they need from us. We tapped into workforce and community partners and CTE partners for the purpose of really bringing this voice. But super important is that we had on our process team students that we paid to be part of that process team. And we help them understand, well, what is the process? What is the purpose of a plan? We really help to educate them to be fully engaged participants in this. In the planning phase, of course, we prioritized equity as an overarching principle. And within the framework, we really began early on setting up some priority areas. Of course, we're an educational, institution. And so what does that education and quality of education look like? Really, what is happening in the instructional space? And then we created some, smaller groups to address and craft the language around those priority areas. We used the data from the environmental scan to help inform us. And then we created kind of a drafting and feedback loop process. So in those groups, they would start drafting kind of what they wanted. That would come to the larger group, and that would go out to the community for feedback. Hey, now we need you to change this word. I mean, it got to like wordsmithing at some point. A great question. How did you prioritize equity while still addressing fear? I think fear is a big part of our society. Our modern society that we live in is predicated on fear of doing the wrong thing, fear of doing nothing, fear of what's coming, kind of that anxious fear of scared about something you don't even know is coming. And so what we tried to do was really focus on, what do we want to do? How do we want to show up for our community? What do we want the organization to look like in kind of a process focused, but also continuous improvement focused process? So fear was not really put on the table as we're going to use this tool to harm, to hurt, to assess performance of individuals, but really looking at the whole organization. This is not about fear. This is about creating a roadmap for where we want to go as an organization. And we're really focused on that. And the equity part is like, how do we do this, keeping in mind all of the needs of the constituents that we need to serve? Implementation phase, we're still in implementation phase. This plan was really, it was ratified by the board in June of 2022. Of course, we're in 2023. We're in 2024 right now because this is school year 2023-24. And so we're in year 2 of the plan. What we've done is really created an integrated planning process where we have the strategic plan sitting at the top. We've got individual plans of every leader in our organization has an individual strategic plan. And then we have all of the people working in direct service and kind of all the way through the organization. Planning is really going together. We also have some adjacent plans. So we're working on a comprehensive facilities plan that is also equity centered, thinking about ADA, thinking about implications for people with different needs. We're thinking about implications for how do we utilize space in a sustainable way. We also have a comprehensive academic plan, as well as a strategic enrollment plan. So we're really trying to focus on planning as a culture of our organization, and also thinking about planning as an imperative for growth as an organization. With regard to those individual strategic plans, well, we have our overall strategic plan. We have unit level plans, and the leaders within those units have to then say, this is how I'm going to get our unit plan done, right? These are the things I'm going to lean into. So for me specifically, we are, of course, working on, implementation of this plan. But my work is really broad. And so I've said that I am, working and focusing this year on, training folks and building capacity in the organization around trauma-informed care, trauma-informed response, and culturally responsive practices. So those are some of the things that I'm doing within the strategic plan, and it aligns with the plan, which I will show you shortly. We're continuing to engage folks on the substance of the plan. Once again, we've got 1,700 employees. We've got employees that feel very, very disconnected from their day-to-day work, whether they are, groundskeepers or working in jobs that don't feel very connected, really trying to help them feel connected. We want everyone who works in the organization and who exists as, tangential to the organization to know that this plan itself works, that the plan is something that we all need to be working towards, and to see themselves as part of that larger structure that we're working on. We've also developed a strategic plan tracking tool to track progress and the key performance indicators. So without further ado, I'm gonna do a new share, and I want to show you to my desktop, please. Nobody judge me. Exit out of here. Quick. Yeah. That. Got a million tabs always, so please just judgments, please. So this is our strategic plan tracking tool, and shout out to Sergey. Sergey Shapilov is our Associate Vice President for Analytics and Institutional Research. And here you can see that this is all kind of linked to the plan itself. I'm going to move something around up here if I can. Because I can't see the top of my tabs. Oh, Zoom. All right. Sorry. So here is the plan website. It's mhcc.edu /strategic plan. You can just do a Google search on it. But you can see here that we're calling it the pathway toward equity. Once again, it is a path and a journey, not a destination. And you can see we have overlaid everything that we're doing with this equity statement. We are talking about kind of how we think about ourselves as an organization and how we commit to intentional work to interrupt oppression and remove barriers. We have our vision statement there. We have our mission statement. And we have our amazing kind of visuals. So this is all the kind of fluffy stuff. You can see that the strategic plan goes through 2027. And we are really focused on these things. So you can see the goals here. If I go deeper and click on this strategic plan where it's downloadable, you can see everything, as well as the environmental scan if you are interested in learning more about our process and what we did. But under the goals, we really wanted this plan to be actionable. And I think the largest number of goals under goal C is 7. So objectives under goal C is 7, but most of them are around 4 or 5. And once again, right, if you have too much that you've put in your plan, it's unlikely that any of it's going to get done. If you have too little in the plan, it's also right, not going to be comprehensive enough to be measurable or impactful. So if you want to see or get to the dashboard, you can go here to MHCC Air, and it will bring you to this page where we can see all of these KPIs. So that's our key performance indicators. And what we said in the plan is we wanted to track how plan implementation really did impact student success, for example. How it increased our diversity. And we're looking at not only diversity of our students, but the diversity of our workforce. We're also thinking and doing the regular loop backs with our community around community engagement, community impressions of the organization, community confidence in the organization, and how we are connecting with our community in a broader way. We're also looking at learning outcomes. And so really thinking about core learning outcomes. One of the kind of most prevalent core learning outcomes is cultural competency and cultural responsivity. We are really thinking about what does it look like to produce learners in a community as diverse as ours without having conversations about race and racism and class and classism and ableism and transphobia and homophobia and all of these things that are prevalent in our society. We want our students to walk away with some understanding of that and how to be citizens of the world within that context. So I can just show you a quick example of student success. And so this is some of the work that is to come, really thinking about where do we have persistent gaps? What are we going to do about those gaps? How do we lean into the plan a little deeper to assess? You can, see this dashboard and to not get too deep into the weeds. It's pretty transparent. You don't have to be, this is not behind a paywall or anything. You can see this information. And so what we want to do is provide this information. You can disaggregate this by age, gender, race, full-time or part-time status, Pell, college readiness, whether they are kind of already at college level, 100 level courses, or if they're working in the ABS, that's our adult basic skills programs. And then you can also do some comparisons with our peer colleges in the area. So some of the work that I am doing is really looking at these persistent equity gaps. We know that if there's a more than 10-point gap between your highest performing students and your lesser performing students, there's something there. There's something to identify and begin questioning. Data, of course, should not provoke fear. It should provoke questions. Why is it like this? If it is like this, are we okay with it? And if not, what are we willing to do? What is the commitment? What is the investment? So we're really looking at this data and trying to see if through the interventions, if through the implementation of our plan and the strategies laid out in the plan, these things change. So I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment and give an opportunity to ask questions in the chat. I will leave 15 minutes for discussion, but I'm going to open up the actual plan so you can see what that looks like and see some of the key performance indicators. Feel free to ask away though while I'm getting this. I don't want to just be scrolling in your face. That's why I'm doing it off camera. Bigger for everyone's eyes. Right. So when I talked about, the groups building some smaller teams, right, they started thinking about, well, what are kind of the buckets of work that we know need to be done? And you can see here under goal A, it's really about teaching and learning. This is about, really building capacity in the organization, providing those ongoing trainings, and time is a resource for teaching staff to engage and integrate those best practices. And so at Mountain Hood Community College, we have set aside a fund. And in that fund, we will give additional stipend and resource for faculty who are wanting to overhaul curriculum by engaging culturally responsive and culturally relevant teaching practices. Super, super important that it's not a fear-based thing. This is a, hey, we want you to do the work. We're going to give you the resources to be successful doing it. Here's where we were talking about that trauma-informed learning environments, that sense of belonging and well-being, and that we'll be collaborating, right? The academy as it stands and as it was created is a siloed academy. And so we know students don't exist in a bubble. Student affairs, academic affairs really do need to be working together to create the conditions for learning for our students. I'm going to scroll a little bit. We are looking at student success and through the lens of disaggregation. We are looking at who is getting D's, F's, and W's and incompletes, and thinking about what does it look like for the conditions of learning that we need to improve to reduce those, because when we look at that data disaggregated, it is bleak. It is our Black and Brown students who are more likely than other students to walk away and not complete an educational opportunity. That's at the course level. So you absolutely are not going to be retained term to term if you're not being retained at the course level. We're looking at support programs and educational services and how we evaluate those on a regular basis. What does it look like to invest in programs like our TRIO advising, our AVID learning, which is our tutoring and wraparound supports. And then we're also thinking about student basic needs, Barney's Pantry, our Head Start, building a pipeline of learners into the organizations, and not forgetting that the parents at Head Starts are oftentimes in most need of educational opportunity too. So we're really trying to see ourselves as a PK 90 kind of organization where education is the life course of our organization. Here you can see really, this is part of my work as well, this organizational structure, systems, and processes, really thinking about how our framework itself really, advances equity through the life cycle of both students and employees. We have the Equity Lens tool, which I will also show you, to embed equity principles into our decisions. How do we decide, what to invest in, what to do, what not to do? Really focus on climate and culture, right? You can have a great strategic plan, but if you haven't addressed the culture of the organization, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And so it's imperative that we are also thinking about what is the climate of the organization? How do we continually improve that climate for the purpose of having people stay here, feel like they belong, and meet those educational or career goals? We have put a lot of resources and money into student basic needs. We recognize that there was this fever pitch at the beginning of the pandemic around student basic needs, and it kind of fizzled out a little bit. And I think it's important that we recognize those needs were there before the pandemic, and they are there still. We have students at about a 30+% rate who have struggled with some form of housing insecurity. We have about 50+% of our students who have struggled at some point with food insecurity. And we've got about 60% who have struggled at some point with technology challenges, whether that's not having access to a laptop, whether that's not having access to Wi-Fi that's reliable. So we're really trying to build up that support system as more of a wraparound service to our students. We're focusing on technology and our facilities themselves. Mount Hood Community College has been around and was built in the 60s. And so, right, the campus was not, really made for accessibility challenges, inclusive restrooms, of course, IT and facilities awareness are imperative so that we have, provided our students with the latest technology for our programs, as well as our employees with the latest technologies to be able to do their jobs effectively and efficiently. And the last is really about community. Building connections with our community so that they know we are here, not as a standalone organization, but as an extension of the community. So thinking about, right, how are we engaging with historically excluded and multilingual communities, our Black and Brown communities, our immigrant and refugee communities must know, because they are the people we really want to serve, about what we can do for them. And then thinking about our business and industry partners as we think about experiential learning, that transition for our students from college to career, earning while learning, building living wage, and ultimately, right, being a resource for transformation in our region around, economic development. And so we're very much focused on that. I'm going to stop sharing now because we have just a few more minutes. I'm going to go back to the slides. But also I want to check in with the questions in the chat. I haven't had a chance to look at that. Equity Lens tool. I'm curious. You say, what? Equity Lens? Absolutely. I will show you the Equity Lens tool. It is on the same page of our strategic plan page. Scroll down so you can see it. And in this equity lens, we are putting race and ethnicity at the center. We are thinking about who are the decision makers, what is the work that we ultimately must do. So this is also a free sourced document. Please, if you would like to practice or use it, or you need any help, reach out to me. The board of directors did approve this Equity Lens tool in 2020, I believe. And we really spent a long time thinking about what are the right questions to ask. Is this tool a linear tool or is it more circular? How does it get us to making better decisions and embedding equity in our decision making as an institution? at the systemic level. Super important. So we're thinking about race and intersectionality, racial, ethnic, and other underserved or historically excluded groups, right? What's the impact on those people? And what is the racial makeup of the decision makers? We recognize that in a kind of dominant culture organization, sometimes the folks who are making the decisions don't have mirrored or similar lived experiences to the people who are impacted. And so we're really trying to think through that. If that's the case, right, how do we get different people at that decision-making table? We're looking at the status quo, how we've always done things, and how the decisions that we will make in the future help to disrupt, to interrupt, to deconstruct how we've always done things. We're trying to show our commitment to social justice and eliminating gaps, really building community capacity and power, and mitigating any negative impacts that anyone might experience from the decisions that we're making. We're including the voices of people who are the most impacted, making sure that they are meaningfully included in the conversation around that decision, that we're looking at things like stakeholder support or opposition, and what does that feedback loop look like? Most importantly, right, we are thinking about that data to inform and how the data, right, shows us whether or not the decision we made was the right one or not. What is the baseline data and how will we measure progress? Super, super important. We also have some kind of, a primer on why we need this. So please, if you are interested, take a peek at that. I'm gonna go back to the slides if I can. All right, so picking up on where we are right now as an organization, we're really in depth with like teaching each other how to use the tracking tool, how to look at those dashboards and make some sense of all of that data. We're also talking about data literacy in general. I think someone named it, right? Data can lead to folks being very fearful. Is that data going to be used against me? Is that data going to illuminate that I'm not great at my job, right? There's so many emotional pieces around the data. And so we're talking about things like confirmation bias and, source bias, right? Do we see the students' verbal information and data as potentially a threat versus data that's on paper, or is one more valid than the other? So that data piece is huge. We are really, we've moved our whole budget process into the planning process. So if you are going to ask for any new financial allocations, it has to be tied to a strategic plan initiative at our organization, or you will be denied. No one will take, you can't even do it. You can't even ask unless it's connected to something that is in that plan. Hugely important for that alignment. We are still working on that transparency and shared focus. The data is not scary. The data is what it is. We have some ability to do things, change that data if we're not okay with it, but really focusing in on what is ours to own, what is ours to do. We continue to work on our community engagement, bringing communities, specifically communities of color, onto campus, freeing up our space, giving that land back for the purpose of having community be engaging in it. And then our board is a board that is an elected board, and those board members have a 4-year service. And so the board that got the award in 2021 is not the same board that exists today. And so part of my work is continuing to engage with the board, to have conversations, to talk about what equity looks like now. Many organizations that get to where we've kind of arrived currently will say, well, we did the work. It's all done, right? We've got that plan, we've got this lens, we've got, no, the work must continue. It's a journey, not a destination. And so continuing to engage the board at that higher level is really important. We also, in 2020, we received about $1 million something. And with that, we have invested it into transforming our former, now defunct bookstore. We were losing probably about $2 million a year on our bookstore. And we're changing that into the Equity and Community Resource Center. So I brought these photos for you to see. I'm super excited for that to continue. We are continuing to invest general fund dollars in our Student Basic Needs program. We've been able to move from, employees with full-time other jobs who were doing that work to an actual unit. And that unit is situated under my area, which is diversity, equity, inclusion. And so we've gone from 0 staff to a staff of 7. We have student workers who are supporting each other. We have a new person whose full role is to service and provide fresh food to the campus. That is our food pantry coordinator. We're just doing what it really is going to take for our community to build up the organization to meet our future goals. So I have tools. As I said, I would share this slide deck. It is free, available to you. I really am here just to spread the message, to help you as an organization, as an individual in that organization. Some of the things that I think have been really critical for us and that I've been helping to build capacity is the work around American Council on Education's Shared Equity Leadership Reports. They have been focused on really how do you build capacity in an organization. The National Association of Diversity Officers in Higher Education has their framework for advancing anti-racist strategy on campus. Amazing, phenomenal work. The Association of Community College Trustees has their equity agenda to engage boards, regions, trustees. And then the Governmental Agency on Race and Equity has their Racial Equity Toolkit, another amazing and phenomenal tool to help really start unpacking how to do this work. You'll have access to all of the links to the strategic plan website, the tracker tool, the equity lens tool, the strategic plan, and the environmental scan as well. And so you also have me. I want to, of course, shout out all the Mount Hood Community College peeps who have traveled this journey and continue to travel it with me. Our Board of Education is amazing. It is the most diverse Board of Education in the state. Our president and our executive cabinet for funding and prioritizing this work, and our students and community for which we do this work. Here's my contact information, and we have a few minutes for questions. So I'm going to check the chat for anything. A few questions.
Tracy, there are a few questions in the Q&A.
Yes, I'm going to check on those as well.
Oh, awesome.
Thank you. All right, so the first was I shared the strategic plan, so that's been answered. Any participatory action research methods? Absolutely. So we did have the focus groups. We had individual sessions with people who wanted to share. We had Qualtrics, where we were just sending out stuff to folks and saying, hey, can you please give us feedback on this? We were sending out kind of in a iterative kind of way as we were completing parts of the plan. We were sending that out to the whole community to give feedback, taking that back to those smaller work groups. So there were tons of different strategies. We also had, because we have a growing population of people who English is not their first language, we did some community-based organization opportunities where we went into those community-based organizations and began having those conversations directly with the folks, with people who speak their language, who people, people who kind of recognize the need for them to be involved. And so it was really, kind of a two-way communication effort. And it continues, right? As we're still saying, hey, we did this plan, this is what we're working on, this is the progress we're making. We were really trying to continue to make that connection with the community. Thank you, Andy, for that question. What is the simplest story you find yourself telling that successfully gets unusual suspects on board with this process? What's a simple thing you share that gets head nodding on campus? I think simplicity is a challenge, but when I was doing this work and getting, students to participate, the students themselves were saying, oh my gosh, like this is what we need, right? Like I remember that one time that I was in that class and I was teary-eyed and upset, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to turn in that thing on time, that my instructor said, don't worry, take another week, get it to me by next week, right? And that's a culturally responsive response, right? Like, I think if you can begin to connect the actions and the work to the people who experience those actions and that work, I don't know, and creating an opportunity to hear from those students for sure. Absolutely. Christina Schaefer, hello. I think they can unmute you so you can ask your question.
I don't think I had a question. Did I
Oh,
have my hand up? Sorry. I apologize. But it's lovely to see and hear you, Tracy.
thank you. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think if as much as possible, giving students a voice in this conversation for them to tell their stories. I can tell their stories for them, but let me tell you, the board is transformed when they hear it out of the student's mouth themselves. The board is transformed when there's an opportunity for that exchange between the students themselves. When the students show up to the board and say, hey, student basic needs, this is how it's changed my life, right? Having an opportunity to have a laptop. Those are the moments where we see deep engagement and transformation. So as much as you can, elevate the voices of students, speak with them, not for them. That's where I'll leave that. Other questions, concerns, challenges? Are you in a state where DEI is a naughty word? Happy to help talk you through that. See folks slowing down in the chat. I really appreciate everyone for participating today. It's been amazing. Thank you to NCORE for hosting me. Thank you so much to Dedrick and Stephanie for making this possible. Thank you to our ASL interpreters. Many, many thanks. Thank you all. Please.
I think we have one more question.
Oh, yeah.
Daniel French, you're feel free to speak.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hi, Daniel.
Great. Hi, Tracy. Wow, this is really informative. I'm inspired. And one last question I have for you is, what has there been any glimmers of hope in regards to incorporating arts and culture into your either the process or the programming? And what role have you seen arts and culture play in furthering inclusion on campus?
Oh my goodness. So we have an amazing arts program, and I think of this work as putting some dye into a bucket of water. So you have blue. I'll pick blue because it's my favorite color, the color of my stone. Put a drop of dye in water, and it spreads slowly across the water until the whole bucket is a nice, beautiful shade of blue. And so what's interesting as you began having these conversations, people in different places with different responsibilities and roles will see where there's a place to lean in. And so we have phenomenal students who are artists, and their art for a long time has been relegated to the art area. We've got students who are sharing their lived experiences, their stories of displacement, stories of racialized experiences, stories of love and hope. And it's not been seen by everybody. And now our coordinator of our hub, which is our kind of area where all of our student services are available to students, financial aid, advising, student basic needs is situated right there, right now. But all of these resources are there, and it was blank walls. And now guess what? It is covered in student art. And when people walk in, there's this warmth because it's not only reflecting the cultures of our students, the experiences of our students through their art, but it's warm and loving and beautiful. And so it's not something that I did personally. It's about beginning the conversation and inspiring others to do and act where they have the ability to. And I think that's just the story of this work more than anything. It can't be one person. And if you have the opportunity to look at that shared equity leadership work that the American Council for Education has done, this is what I'm trying to spread on campus. I'm only one person, right? I don't have the responsibility over that area. I don't have the responsibility over a lot of areas. I just have the ability to influence and call people to action, and what they do with that becomes beautiful. So thank you for that question. It's an amazing question. We've also done things on campus. So one of our deans in health professions, in their effort to really engage our Latina students in their native language, is for the whole division to work on learning Spanish and phrases in Spanish. And so they're doing that work. I didn't say that they should. I didn't say they had to. They're doing it because they recognize it's a way to really meet the needs of that population and their students. And so these things are happening across the campus, and it's a large campus, so I don't have the ability to tell all of those stories. But what I will say is be that drop of dye in that water. If you have the ability, do so.
Thank you so much. That was so helpful. I appreciate you.
Thank you. All right, we just have a few more minutes. Rodney has a hand raised. Yay, Rodney. Nothing else. Oh, looks like Joanna. Joanna, would you like to speak?
Hello. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. It really was very helpful. I had a question. You talked about having students tell their stories, and I find that qualitative data is really important for helping to interpret numbers on quantitative data, because sort of tells us, I mean, we can see the numbers, we can see the gaps, but what are the causes of those gaps? What do students actually need? But I find it sometimes difficult to convince administration about the need for qualitative data. So do you have, and especially in strategic planning, so do you have any advice about that?
Yeah, I mean, the numbers on paper is not whole data. It's raw data. It really doesn't tell the story. And so I think if you have the ability to bring those students forward and once again speak with them, not for them, but also say, hey, this is the lived experience. Something that we did in the early stages of our student basic needs work was to provide whatever the resource students were coming with, and then send them a survey and say, hey, did that help you? Were you able to complete your course? What else could we be doing? And we used that information and compiled that data where we didn't have the students perform their poverty and have to show up somewhere to be the face of student basic needs. But we shared it. We shared it with the rest of the campus and said, hey, this is what our students are saying about the impact of this work. We can either continue to strap together, resources and grants, or we can say, this is important. This is important as a persistence and retention effort, and we're going to put general fund dollars behind it. And it convinced folks. So I think it's just like opening up the crack, giving students the opportunity. If you have a board that has regular board meetings, and you have a person that's in charge of like student life or civic engagement, making that connection, getting those students to show up to that board and say, hey, we had our students a few years ago when there was a potential, and this was on the heels of COVID and enrollment decline, where the board was considering a tuition increase, where the students just showed up and said, $5 more per course might break my back, right? And their voices were heard. And so there was a pause put on that. So the students' voices are powerful. I've never seen an administrator, a president, a board member say, no, I don't want to hear from them. I'm not interested. So you just have to, also prime the students on how to present themselves and not necessarily what to say, but get them, comfortable, because these are very intimidating spaces, but encourage them that their voices are super important and critical for, determining the direction of the organization. Thank you so much. All right, well, we are out of time officially. It is 2:30 on the West Coast, so I'm gonna jump off. I want to honor your time, but want to say thank you again to everyone involved in putting this together. Thank you to our ASL interpreters. Thank you to NCORE for being amazing. And I will stop sharing and stop talking.
Thank you, everyone that's attended this session of our webinar series. I want to thank Tracy Simmons for her expertise and her knowledge. This was a very highly attended session, and we think that has to do with the level of content and expertise you were able to share with our participants. So hopefully we'll see you next week, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.